I might have been a good girl, if it had been in the cards. But all of that was dashed to hell 2 days after I was born, when the dead rose up and started to walk on a battlefield in a small town in Pennsylvania called Gettysburg.
I love alternate history stories. Although finding good ones that center characters of color like myself is not easy. I've watched shows like The Man in the High Castle and For All Mankind, but movies and TV can only take their theme so far to be marketable. Dread Nation by Justina Ireland came out in 2018 and takes place around the year 1880 after zombies rose up at the Battle of Gettysburg, upending the American Civil War and sending the world into turmoil. Afterwards, the US government implemented the Native and Negro Re-Education Act. Children of color were forced into Reformation schools to be taught combat to protect rich white folk. It's a direct parallel to the Reformation schools that a lot of Native Americans were sent to forcibly during the 1800s and up into the 1900s. We follow Jane, a teenage girl just trying to survive in a world where the scariest things aren't always the dead trying to consume you. This book, I was so anticipating it that I went to the bookstore, bought it, and went to the park across the street to start reading immediately. It has deckled edges, which is supposed to be reminiscent of the way older novels were produced. Everything about this book has made it one of my favorites of all time. Another cute thing about this book is that each chapter begins as in which dot dot dot. Like the prologue reads, in which I am born and someone tries to kill me. This chapter is exactly as described. Jane is born on the day the dead rose up on the field of Gettysburg on a plantation to the mistress of the house. When the midwife sees that Jane is black, she tries to kill the baby. She was so shocked because her mother was the richest white woman in Holler County, Kentucky. Auntie Aggie saves her and mostly raises her. Her mama, a liar, tells the story differently, claiming to be clear headed enough to stop the attempted infanticide herself. The former plantation, like many other large properties, became islands in a sea of shamblers, their word for zombies. They erected fences and alarm systems and patrols. They put bars on the windows, and the concept of chattel slavery was replaced with the current system of racist oppression. A lot like our world, slavery did not end after the Civil War, it just changed shape. This part is called The Civilized East. Each chapter begins with a letter Jane wrote to her mother back at Rose Hill. She writes about how Miss Preston's school has great teachers, but begins the chapter describing one of the cruelest teachers there, Miss Duncan. She's leading them in scythe close combat techniques. 17-year-old Jane goes to a fancy reform school for the more well to do girls of color whose patrons or guardians had the funds to send them there. The opportunity to be an attendant who are tasked with protecting white ladies from shamblers and from having their virtue compromised is still an appealing opportunity as a career for many. They're given a break from training to receive lemonade from Mrs. Spencer, whose farm borders the school. There, Jane runs into Lily. She used to watch Lily on occasion as a favor for her older brother. Jane talks to Big Sue about a lecture that night on her way to hang up her scythe. She runs into Catherine, not Kate, Devereaux, her rival. Catherine is hopeful Dr. Garing will invent a cure, but Jane doubts it. They've only been declared shambler free in the county for a year, and the army stopped fighting shamblers 5 years back. She ignores Catherine and makes to go to the dining hall, but is stopped by Ruthie, who tells her Miss Preston wants to speak to her. Jane arrives to find Miss Anderson there as well. She's been falling behind in her etiquette classes and was found with contraband, newspapers, mostly books. Reading is frowned upon for girls like them in this time, in our world, and in this alternate history. But Miss Anderson is asked to leave when Jane accuses the teacher of unfairly giving her a difficult exam. She's surprised to learn she's right and is going to be taught etiquette by Miss Duncan instead, so she has no choice but to go to the lecture that night with Miss Duncan's class. She barely has time to eat and change before climbing into the steam-powered iron pony. It's a carriage with steel bars on the windows. Horses are basically endangered since the dead rose up. Many soldiers turned on their horses, like how Major McKean, Jane's father, came home and turned, nearly killing Jane's mother. That's why she currently runs Rose Hill instead. The ride into Baltimore takes about half an hour. Jane thinks about the dead, how winter is a reprieve for the northern states, but the summer doesn't end for the lost states of the South. Zombies go dormant during the colder times, which is why spring is marked by harvesting of the dead. They spot a random shambler just outside of town, and Jane reaches for her penny charm she got from Auntie Aggie. It's a penny hanging on a necklace, and it's blessed with hoodoo magic. It's not really specified of which type. It gets cold when she's in danger. She flashes back to her first encounter with the Shambler when she was a little girl at Rose Hill. She was with the other kids, led by twin brothers Zeke and Joe. Their parents were Mr. Isaac, a white man, one of the few white men on the property, and Auntie Evelyn, a black woman. Jane's mother let them live on the plantation as long as, they helped around, did their fair share like everybody on the plantation, not caring that their marriage was frowned upon by others either. That day, the kids were playing at the border fence, which is usually marked with wherever the picket line fence property line used to be. It's a little bit further past that. They have a series of stakes in the ground, some barbed wire running across, things like that. They were poking a shambler with a stick when the shambler broke free and bit Zeke. Jane never went near the border again. Zeke got a nail through the head to ensure he wouldn't come back, and Joe ran away to a combat school a few years later. In town, Jane runs into Jackson Keats, Lily's brother, and her ex-situationship. She promises to meet him tomorrow night, and together with the other girls, they jog over to the Baltimore University of Surgery, Medicine, and Thanatology. Kate is stopped at the door by two officers who want to check her for weapons, but she doesn't like to be touched. They're treating her nicely because they think she's white for the moment, so Jane comes up playing up to their ideas about how black people behave to trick them into chasing a non-existent shambler. Inside, the room is packed, most of the attendees of the survivalist party, like Mayor Carr. He's a big bull of a man, dominating the second row, wearing the red and white striped ascot of the survivalist party. Survivalists believe that the continued existence of humanity depends on securing the safety of white Christian men and women, whites being superior and closest to God, so that they might set about rebuilding the country in the image of its former glory, the way it was before the war against the dead. Professor Garing starts explaining how the Gettysburg strain evolved from just turning humans after they die to the custard strain, where now you turn in minutes upon being infected. British occupied India and Scotland have taken to beheading and burning their dead respectively. Then he tries saying that people of color have a natural resistance to the virus, like animals.
You can excuse racism.
His assistant, a young black man named Othello, wheels out a cage full of three shamblers, freshly turned. He's gonna have Othello voluntarily get bitten, but Jane speaks up to try and convince the professor to change his mind. He doesn't listen, and Othello sticks his hand in the cage. He's bitten and turns faster than most of the audience, professor included, is used to. Miss Duncan takes control of the situation as Othello attacks Garing, and everyone tries to flee in a panic. She tells Jane to use the gun she has hidden in her skirts, because of course Jane brought a gun without asking.
I've done nothing wrong, ever, in my life.
I know this, and I love you.
And take out the undead while the other girls help evacuate the school. She takes out Othello with a clean shot and a not yet risen Garing with two more shots. Then the caged shamblers break free, and as one jumps off the stage, she fires a shot into its head. The remaining shamblers turn on her, and she shoots one and takes aim at the last when she realizes she's out of ammo. An attendant in the audience draws the shambler's attention with a gunshot, but runs off, leaving her charge, this white lady, passed out in the aisle. The shambler charges the woman, Mayor Carr's wife. Jane gets into a tussle with it before an unknown Native American man shoots the shambler, saving her. He leaves, Catherine shows up, and Jane walks out of the school. As soon as they get back, they are immediately punished. Jane for her outburst and having a revolver without permission, Catherine for wearing a corset. Miss Preston's banned corsets because they inhibit movement for fighting. 4 days later, while doing housework, cleaning, and scrubbing the school, Jackson visits. Lily and the Spencers are missing. No sign of shamblers breaking in. He wants Jane to investigate. She agrees, and Catherine blackmails her into letting Catherine tag along with them. Jackson gave her a copy of Tom Sawyer before he left.
The Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
Jane quickly recounts how she left for Miss Preston's years ago. Her mother always hid her when truancy officers came for the other colored children, taking them to combat schools. But that year, Auntie Aggie, having been entrusted with hiding Jane, told her instead to turn herself over to be educated. She worked with another woman, Miss Fifi, a hoodoo priestess, who gave Jane the penny necklace. Aggie believed Jane had a great destiny and sent her off. Back in the present, Jane and Catherine, while wearing trousers much to Catherine's dismay, sneak out and meet Jackson just outside the Spencers' homestead. Together, they sneak into the house and find it deserted, like they left in a hurry with no sign of a struggle. Catherine asks why Lily was with the Spencers to begin with, and Jackson explains that she is passing like Catherine, and they didn't want her to be forced to go to a combat school because of the color of her skin. They're interrupted by the approach of voices and hide in a shambler hole. It's like a cellar or a panic room, and they go unnoticed as the voices approach. One of them, Miss Anderson, and two men who were sent by Mayor Carr to pack up the Spencer stuff. They leave. Jackson doesn't want to leave though, as dawn begins to break, but Jane's penny goes cold, interrupting them. A shambler groans in the darkness. A herd of 10 zombies surrounds them, and the three make quick work of them before agreeing to keep looking into the disappearances of the Spencers and other families in the area. They're dog tired the rest of the day at school, and after classes are brought before Miss Preston. Miss Anderson is there along with the native man, Mr. Redfern. They're invited to a dinner at the mayor's house, specifically to be attendants for his wife and her friends, who strangely have lost some of their own attendants lately. Jane tries to wriggle out of it by saying Miss Duncan deserves an award too, but they just agree to invite her as well. Jane hears them talking about one of the other missing families as Catherine and her leave Miss Preston's office.
What's that supposed to mean?
That night, Jane dreams of Rose Hill. Her mother didn't agree with the concept of slavery and was actually disappointed when her husband, the Major, joins up with the Confederacy during the Civil War. She would sleep around with the field hands, at least that's the rumors that went around, because she spent her money buying up enslaved folk, whole families even. The existence of Jane only furthered any rumors, but the fact her mother was willing to help during the early years of discord won most folks over. They had no choice but to befriend her if they wanted to survive. Before the Major left to war, he bought Rachel, who didn't like how Jane's mother treated the formerly enslaved folk like actual people, with wages and no whippings and, basic dignity. Slavery ended with the Great Concession after President Jefferson Davis of the Confederate States surrendered to Abraham Lincoln, allowing Union soldiers to march through the South, ridding them of the Shambler Plague. Rachel believed in a hierarchy and plotted against Jane and her mother. The weeks pass without incident. They're fitted for attendance wear and are going about classes as per usual. Catherine and Jane are talking at lunch one day when she's asked about her mother, and she remembers how mad the Major got one night when Jane was asked to read the Bible aloud. He didn't approve of Ophelia, Jane's mother, who was unnamed till now, teaching black folk to read. Catherine pulls Jane out of her memory to tell her that Jackson is by the tree line. He's busted up from having broken into Mayor Carr's estate. Catherine brings up that they're going to a dinner at the mayor's, and Jane is roped into looking for clues about the Spencers' disappearance. Jane wears a lovely emerald green dress, and Catherine wears a beautiful pink one. Jane even calls Catherine, saying that she looks like a snack. Miss Duncan and Miss Anderson accompany them. They're wearing like gray, taking the mayor's iron pony to his estate in Baltimore. His estate is lit up by the recent electric lights invented by Thomas Edison, who still exists in this timeline apparently. Jane spots Jackson with makeup hiding his bruises, disguised as one of the house staff. Before dinner starts, Catherine learns from the others that one of the missing families had their iron pony attacked by shamblers. Jane learns that Daniel Redfern is Lenape, was sent to a combat school at 6, and possibly dating Amelia Duncan? Dinner is quiet with Redfern commenting that he's seen Jane on the road slaying shamblers at night. They call her the Angel of the Crossroads. He thinks she's arrogant and can do better for herself. It's much more quiet after that as the attendants watch the others eat. Then one of the guests turns mid-meal and Jane takes Redfern's blade out of his pocket because he's ignoring her and talking with someone else, and she throws it at the shambler as he lunges for Miss Anderson. The guests are not as thankful for her heroics as they should be.
But that's rude.
Mayor Carr quickly moves the guests onto gossip and cigars. Jane and Catherine wonder how the man could have gotten inside with a bite without being noticed, and Catherine covers for Jane so she can snoop around. She thinks the shambler must be on the premises and spots Jackson again in the mayor's office. He begs her to help as he needs her to read the files for any signs of Lily. She agrees, finding a locked drawer and having Jackson use lockpicks to get it open. Inside is a book with the title Summerland on it, but before they can find out more, they hear a gun cock. It's Miss Anderson and Mr. Redfern, who tell Jane that Summerland is a town in Kansas, someplace they may soon see firsthand.
Oh shit, here we go again.
They're taken downstairs to see the mayor, who had planned to catch Jane snooping anyway. He's sending Jane and Jackson to Summerland, and Miss Preston reveals she's been working with the mayor the whole time. They're going to send Catherine too, even though she had nothing to do with it. They've been sending attendants who graduated to Summerland. That's where they've been going this whole time, and why alumni never visit the school. Miss Preston feels that Catherine is too pretty to be an attendant and that no one wants to hire her because of that, so they're going to send her to be an attendant out west. Miss Anderson goes to fetch her as Miss Preston continues on about how the combat school has existed as long as Summerland has. The eastern cities aren't as safe as the politicians have been claiming, so they're just hoping to move out west, restart things the way they were before the war, including the continued subjugation of others. Catherine arrives, shocked by what's going on. They're interrupted by the arrival of a man telling the mayor there's been a breach on one of the perimeters. The mayor tells them they'll be on the train out west in the morning as he walks out. This part is called The Cruel West. At this point, we've been reading letters Jane has written to her mother that she thought were being unanswered, but it turns out Ophelia has been writing to her the whole time as well, and her letters haven't been delivered either. Miss Anderson throws a packet of those letters at Jane as she shuffles them out onto the train bound for Kansas in the early morning. Jane swears vengeance as she curses the woman out. Summerland is a town on the frontier, an arid western grassland town fighting to survive with barely a brick wall barrier to protect it, though it is a large wall at least. Once Jackson is uncuffed, he punches Mr. Redfern and makes a break for it, telling the girls to follow, even though Catherine is still chained to the rail cart. He is quickly caught by 3 white men and Mr. Redfern, while Jane is left to free Catherine with the keys left behind. They are escorted to the sheriff's office where Jackson is already in a cell. There they meet Sheriff Snyder, a survivalist, who tells them the rules. Basically, the place is very Christian, and even though they're expected to defend the town, they're not allowed to use guns, only the white folk. But Jane sees an opportunity and tells Sheriff Snyder that Catherine isn't colored. Jackson claims she isn't dark either. Snyder orders for a scientist to come test their claims as he tells them the rest of the rules. Prayer on Sundays, bathing once a week, they get paid on Tuesdays. The scientist arrives and escorts Jane and Catherine to his lab as he wants to test his experiments on Jane. His name is Gideon. He has a limp in his walk, and a man named Bill takes the rear with a shotgun, poking Jane in the back until she has had enough and kicks his feet out from under him and puts her knee on his neck. She threatens him before Gideon pulls out a gun. He tells her not to hurt the sheriff's cousin. He reminds Bill that Gideon is the reason that he gets treated for some kind of medical issue by the town doctor. They continue on through the frontier town, passing a brothel with a woman outside it. Her name is the Duchess. She runs the place, but most people don't speculate about what goes on under the roof, assuming the men who visit just sleep. In the next chapter, Ophelia's letters reveal that she heard about families packing up and moving west. Jane and Catherine enter the basement laboratory. There he tells them he's invented a bunch of stuff for the town, mostly weapons and the electric lights. He gives Jane a vaccine, assuring her he's tested it on himself and some cats. Then he uses phrenology to get some measurements of Catherine's skull to determine her race. He doesn't believe in it, but the numbers are for Pastor Snyder, the sheriff's father, who does believe in that stuff. They're taken to the general store to be given clothing, trousers, single pair of garments, stuff like that. They're only allowed to shop on Tuesdays. Then one of the sheriff's men comes in saying the pastor declares Catherine to be white. Jane is allowed to escort her to the church. Catherine hates lying, especially about her race and having to talk down to black folk, but Jane assures her that they just have to be patient and await an opportunity to escape. They meet the pastor at the church. He's a horribly racist man, saying Jane is not allowed into the church because she bears the curse of Ham, and sends her away to the Duchess.
But that's rude.
There, the Duchess gives her a room to share and show her the bath that she can use. The faucet and piping was designed by Gideon as well. At dinner in the meeting hall, Jane is basically threatened by Pastor Snyder. Then she meets a nice girl her age named Ida, who I'm 99% sure is Ida B. Wells in this timeline. She is from the Lost States compound, where they're trained from 10 to 13, with children forced to do labor in fields. And if they're punished, they're basically just put on a train west. Jane mentions that slavery is illegal, but there is a loophole in the 13th Amendment. Shamblers don't have rights, but since many believe people of color are immune, they claim many have been bitten and are thus void of rights to begin with. Their convo was interrupted by the preacher leading them in a sermon, going on about non-believers and the rightful order of things before he guides them in prayer. Jane's mother writes about a new group made up of former slave patrols calling themselves survivalists. She warns Jane about them and to stay clear. The next morning, the girls and boys line up as the sheriff and others on horseback lead them towards the border wall. The sight of horses is a shock to Jane, but familiar to the kids from the Lost States for some reason. After a long jog with the children singing work songs, they're fed by a cook some porridge that runs out before Jane gets to the front. She is given a bowl and they're led on another run to the barbed wire fence where some of them are assigned to fence building while the rest grab rusted weapons from a shed. Jane tries bringing her concerns about the weapons to the sheriff and he kicks her down before Ida leads her away. She's assigned to patrol the wall. It's like 20 feet high and like 5 feet thick. They're not supposed to get rid of the dead collecting along the wall. The sheriff thinks they'll attract more shamblers that way. It's quiet for a while they're patrolling before one of the girls falls onto the shambler infested side and another climbs down to help. The dead close in as Jane runs to help, her rusty sickles barely able to get the job done. She spots the attendants who were there the night of Dr. Garing's lecture, now turned shambler. She saves the girls that fell in, finding a sword from a long dead Civil War soldier. When she climbs back up on the wall, Bill has a rifle aimed at the trio. He thinks they were bit and accidentally shoots one girl before another does turn and tries to leap at him. Jane uses her new sword to take her out and climbs down to threaten Bill for being reckless and a coward. Then goes back to patrol for the rest of the day. The rest of the week passes by quickly. Jane gets her meager wage and uses it to get a fresh bath and one of the Duchess's girls to braid her hair. That night, she thinks about the day before the major at Rosehill turned shambler. He came into the room where Ophelia was reading to a young Jane, drunk and violent. Ophelia hit the major in the head with the heavy book and told Jane to go to Auntie Aggie. The memory keeps her from sleeping, so she sneaks out of the room where they sleep. Without beds, mind you, they're only allowed blankets. They just sleep on the floor. Cora, a big girl who is a favorite of the sheriff's, tries stopping Jane, but she just kicks the girl in the mouth and climbs out the window. She sees the brightly lit up section of town for the white folk and hops to a nearby roof of a building she thought vacant. Inside is Gideon, who pulls a gun on her before putting it away. She asks him why they don't kill the shamblers, and he says it's what the preacher and sheriff want. He warns her that the last person who asked too many questions was another Miss Preston's girl, Maisie. He says this town is meant to symbolize the strength of the survivalist party, help them gain favor politically, but he doesn't agree with their sentiments on race and hierarchy. She asks about Jackson, and he says he hasn't seen anyone matching her description. She fears he may be dead. When she climbs back onto the floor to sleep, she silently cries herself.
No, I'm still sad.
The next few days, as she grieves the only person she ever romantically loved, she notices the dwindling portions of food at breakfast and dinner. More white families have been arriving, but they haven't gotten any help with the shamblers for patrol. One night, half starved like the others around her, she sneaks out again to look for Catherine and hopefully some food. After checking the homes with lights on, she starts breaking into the homes with lights off. It's there she is caught at gunpoint by Lily. The girl asks about her brother, but Jane lies, telling her he's just been working. Lily tells her how Mr. Spencer was going into debt and owed the mayor, who pressured him to pack up his family and move west. A lot of the families there weren't the brightest, thinking the traditional values of Summerland made sense. Catherine has been talking sense into them. Lily admires how the girl can smile and get others to agree with her with just a few words. Lily puts on her boots to show Jane what's made her even more scared lately. She hands Jane her gun to hold, saying she won it from some dumb boys up the street. Lily leads her to a building, saying she was there to go in and refuses to go back after what she saw last time. Inside, she finds shamblers being used to turn a metal cage of some kind as they chase a sleeping black man in another cage. Gideon is there and offers her food and answers, guiding her through tunnels that connect the town. He tells her he prefers to let the sheriff underestimate him, which is why he usually doesn't wear his leg brace, which helps him walk without a limp. He takes her past the locked gate that he has the key to and into his lab. There he gives Jane a jar of peach slices, half of which she saves for Ida, before he explains how the Shambler cage is a gross perversion of his idea. He wanted Summerland to be a noble beacon of hope, with technology to protect it and help with labor. But they built the town without any natural resources to power his design, a Faraday machine, so they turned shamblers, but it's inefficient, barely enough to power the lights. He wanted to have an electrified barrier fence, but they'd have to build more generators, and the Snyders refused to make the white folk work. He has her leave before it gets too late, but she is caught by the sheriff, who clocks her and she passes out. She awakens to being dragged by the sheriff and pastor and tied to a wooden post. Bill gathers the others from the barrier detail to witness, and the pastor gives a sermon about them knowing their place before the sheriff rips off her lucky penny and they open her shirt to begin the process of whipping Jane. Bill keeps tally, repeating numbers to prolong her suffering, and as he reaches 11, Catherine comes forward to beg the sheriff to stop. Gideon got Catherine, claiming she is the one that Jane works for. The sheriff agrees to show mercy, and the Duchess helps carry Jane to her brothel. Gideon brings some salve, and the Duchess treats her as Jane uses the time to plot. She convinces them that Catherine is a girl who was there because of a man's jealous wife, and how she could be just what the widowed sheriff needs. Then she asks the Duchess if she has wine and laudanum, which she'll need by the end of the month. She awakens to Catherine yelling at her. She's confused at first, but realizes it's a ruse to trick the Duchess's girls into believing the lie they're trying to sell. Jane tells her the plan is for her to romance the sheriff and drug him, and they'll get out of Summerland, but Catherine wants to save everyone from the Snyders. Jane has plenty of time to consider how to take the others into her plan as she heals up for the week. By then, she is well enough to resume her duties as Catherine's attendant, thanks to Catherine asking the pastor and him saying yes. Catherine hasn't been able to get the drugs. The Duchess hasn't been able to get the drugs, but Jane does get her Confederate sword and a new scabbard to go with it, as well as proper attendant's garb. She finds Catherine surrounded by the drovers, which she quickly scares off and escorts to the sheriff. Catherine asks for better weapons for Jane, and the sheriff gives her a pair of sickles, specifically her sickles that Redfern confiscated. Then the sheriff tries sweet-talking Catherine into letting Jane go home to give them alone time. They're interrupted by one of the drovers telling the sheriff about an emergency at the barrier, leaving the girls to attend to it. They sneak into the sheriff's office to snoop around for a map of anything useful, but soon they hear footsteps. Catherine finds a map, but they have to hide as quick as possible as in walks in none other than Jackson, very much alive.
Night after amazing night.
He recounts how Daniel Redfern, who was supposed to kill him, let him go and told him to head north to a town called Nicodemus. They're egalitarians, but pacifists, so they've offered refuge but refused to interfere in Summerland. Jackson's been looking for ammunition and Lily, and Jane tells him she's okay. They hear noises outside, and Jackson barely has time to tell them how Baltimore was overrun, and some of the Miss Preston's girls and Miss Duncan are in Nicodemus.
What's that supposed to mean?
They head outside to distract whoever is coming, which turns out to be the preacher. Catherine does a fine job at stalling him, and when they leave him, Catherine drops the bombshell revelation that she was raised in a brothel. She's used to pretending for the sake of men. Back at Catherine's house, Jane helps her get out of her stifling fancy clothes as she dons a nightgown. She tells Jane it came from a Chinese man the sheriff met who lived in the house before her. Jane wonders what happens to him and remembers an article trying to paint the Chinese in the West as greedy and untrustworthy. She also says one of my favorite quotes. It seems strange that in these very fraught times, folks would be more concerned about hard-working people trying to find a better life than the monsters that actually want to eat them. Catherine then breaks down, explaining how she hates the role assigned to her because she is white-passing and pretty. She is expected to marry, and she doesn't want that ever, and she doesn't want to live a spinster lifestyle with a woman either. She isn't attracted to anybody. Catherine is Arrow Ace, and Jane quickly accepts her. Jane herself admits to liking boys like Gideon and Jackson, as well as girls like Mary at Miss Preston.
Ha! Gay!
Then Catherine says she wants to be like Hattie McCree, the first attendant. She was assigned to the daughter of President Johnson, Martha Johnson. She protected the girl when the White House was overrun by Shamblers in 1869. She traveled the world and taught her skills to other girls. Jane assures Catherine that her beauty is a weapon, and it helps calm the other girl. Gideon arrives, Jane greeting him as Catherine rests. He invites them to a noon meal tomorrow, telling her that the sheriff was busy handling some Shamblers pressing up against the eastern barrier. She agrees to meet him, butterflies in her stomach. The rest of the day, the drovers keep dropping off food for Catherine, and Jane uses it to make some dinner before Catherine goes to retire for the evening. The sheriff shows up saying he needs Jane as Shamblers broke through the wall and are 2 miles out. She tells Catherine to stay behind to keep an eye out for Lily. Jane shows up to the spot just on the edge of town, seeing that the other colored kids aren't armed, and tells Gideon, who asks Sheriff Snyder. He agrees to let them have at the good weapons, but still no guns. Jane gives Ida her sword, and then they're ready as the sheriff explains that they're to meet the dead just before they breach the inner wire fence. They jog out to the inner fence barrier and are greeted by the sight of a couple hundred Shamblers in the dark. They were originally told it was like 30, maybe 40. Even with the help from some of the folks in town, There's barely 40 of them against a horde. Gideon launches a flare he invented to help them see, and Jane takes control of the chaos and barks out orders to get everyone to fall in line. There are some casualties as the battle drags on through several flares, mostly drovers who are inexperienced or run out of ammo and fail to carry blades. They sing a work song as a harvest, a thing that was common and necessary among enslaved folk to help them get through the day. After the Shamblers are taken care of, Gideon tells Jane she did great, but she tells him his vaccine didn't work. He assures her it does, and then they part ways for the night. We are told by Ophelia's letter that she tried to tell Jane that she accepted a man's marriage proposal. Then we cut to a flashback of the time Jane's mother tried to drown her. Despite the cruel act, she survived. Jane still loved her mother. The day after the battle, Jane and Catherine are on their way to meet Gideon for lunch, but stop by the sheriff first to have Jane apologize for the way she talked to the sheriff the night before, to get ahead of him retaliating in any way. After telling them they fixed the barrier wall, he tells Catherine that Jane taking control saved the town, which is a shock. He walks off to the saloon and Jane is immediately suspicious something is wrong. She suggests getting the laudanum from the Duchess, but Catherine leads them to Gideon's lab first. Gideon leads them into his lab where Jane doesn't mince words and explains how she saw signs of intelligence in the Shamblers last night and questions what happened in Baltimore. Gideon explains that the Civil War never ended. The Shamblers just prolonged it. The eastern cities were never sustainable, and the Survivalist Party wanted to use the chance to reinstitute the plantation system of the South. He knows all this because his father is Abraham Carr, former mayor of Baltimore. He built the electric lights for his father's estate.
After amazing night.
He goes on to explain that the undead can communicate somehow, signaling to others miles away that there's food wherever they are. That's why they form a horde. It's a brewing storm, and last night was just a warning of what's to come. He warned the sheriff, but he won't listen. They all agree the sheriff needs to go if anyone is to be saved. Catherine and Jane make to the barrier to examine the fixed breach, picked up by a drover in a wagon on the way, although he makes Jane jog to follow. He tells the girls about how Baltimore wasn't the only city to fall to the horde. A single mass of thousands of Shamblers has overrun Maryland and Delaware and are making their way to Pennsylvania. He leaves them at the wall where they see Sheriff Snyder supervising the reconstruction on a secondary breach from the previous night. He lied to them, and when he leaves, they soon learn that he brought unhappy rich townsfolk to the wall to scare them, and it drew the dead, and that's why they breached it. Catherine leads them in the direction of the sheriff to convince him of the impending threat, but are stopped by Ida warning them that a much bigger horde has been spotted a few miles outside of town. Sheriff Snyder is sending the patrols to fight, but the drovers refuse to fight this time. Catherine goes to try and convince the sheriff of the threat, while Jane stays behind to tell Ida to have the patrols arm up and flee. Then she goes to the Duchess, finding her beaten and bruised. She tells Jane the sheriff found out about Catherine because the pastor asked around about her to the newer families in town. He knows she isn't white, and he threatened to tell the Duchess if she didn't tell him. And now she is running into danger.
Don't hurt her!
Jane tells the Duchess to evacuate and runs after Catherine. In another letter, it's revealed that Ophelia had her secret revealed as well, and it ruined everything for her. She arrives at the sheriff's office to find it surrounded by angry drovers, and she hops on them like stones to get to the door and tumbles through to find herself at gunpoint by the sheriff.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
Catherine is being held hostage. The sheriff's men close the door, and he begins going on about the rightful way of things. Jane eventually sees a chance and goes for one of the men's guns, taking out two of them before pointing it at the sheriff, as the preacher eggs him on. The sheriff has his gun pointed at Catherine, and Jane quickly shoots the sheriff, and the sheriff's gun goes off as well, but he barely misses Catherine. Catherine picks up a fallen gun, and they see the preacher was shot by the sheriff. Jane stays with the dying man as Catherine goes to arm herself from the armory. Jane confesses to the pastor how she killed the major, the man who fathered her.
Surprise,
And leaves the preacher behind to die. When she meets back up with Catherine, she tells her how Ophelia was passing just like her. She pretended to be her former mistress when she died on her way to meet Major McKean.
She's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. Now come on now.
Jane apologizes for making Catherine pretend to be someone she wasn't. Catherine arms herself with a pair of twin swords, and Jane tells her to take off her corset. Catherine retorts that the day she can't take down a shambler and look fashionable is the day she hangs up her rifle.
You can't fight crime if you ain't cute.
Ophelia's final letter to Jane tells her how Rose Hill fell and she fled with a few others to California. On the way out of the sheriff's office, Jane finds her lucky penny. As they exit, a voice screams that there are shamblers in town, and chaos erupts as the girls move to the nicer part of town to save Lily. On the way, Jane spots shamblers, some wearing uniforms from the Revolutionary War, meaning the infection has spread to even those dead long since buried. The Duchess and her girls run up, and together the girls try to enter Gideon's tunnels, but find it locked for some reason. Jane leads them through town, stopping only to help them cut their corsets to run faster without getting winded. They find Lily with Thomas Spencer, the toddler child of Mr. and Mrs. Spencer, both of whom may have died in the night before. They go to the barn to fetch a wagon and a horse, but find some drovers trying to steal it. Jackson pops up and shoots one of the men, with Lily happy to see her brother. The Duchess's girls help attach the wagon to the horses, and the children climb in with them. They leave the drovers behind as Jane, Jackson, and Catherine jog after. They quickly make it past the northern wall and continue on to Nicodemus. Jackson tells Jane that Sue survived, and she found a letter in the rubble of Miss Preston's. It's from her mother, who says she moved to a town built by survivalists called Haven. They head north towards Nicodemus. Jane makes it her mission from then on to take down the threat of the survivalists and find her mother. Jane is such a compelling character to follow. Tragic, like the Shakespeare she enjoys. She's a hopeless romantic, like me, and loves drama. Her favorite color is green, but blue is her second favorite color. Catherine is also very interesting to learn about, and the two represent the many lived experiences of being black, then and now. I won't go too much into it because I'm certainly not anyone to speak on the matter, but just know this book tackles many topics like colorism, beauty standards, misogynoir, and many more things I'm not smart enough to put into words. Justina Ireland understands that zombie narratives are only so compelling based on what they say, like how Dawn of the Dead was a criticism of consumerist culture at the time. This book came about because the author was inspired by Pride and Prejudice and zombies, and from there the story only grew. As fictional as this story may be, the things that inspired it were all too real. Reform schools, sharecropping, the rise of a nationalist hate group in the aftermath of the Civil War. These are the real-life inspirations for the twisted horrors Justina builds her tale around. But that's all I want to say on this. I'll see you all in the next one when I cover Book 2, Deathless Divide, and we see Jane and Catherine on their adventures as they seek out the distant lands of California. Until then, happy Halloween. Bye.
Bye!